Welcome. Good day, everyone. So, live coding session for the data engineering class. It's nice to have you guys here. I hope we are good. So, I'll share my screen now. We'll get started. All right. So, I hope my screen is visible. My screen is visible. You can just say yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Please, your voice is not really that audible. Can you?
Oh, okay. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we
Can you
can.
hear me better now? All right.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Coming, I'm not able to share my screen.
All right.
Is my screen visible now?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Good day. Good day from wherever. I'm Nemeka. A data scientist at Amway AI Labs, and I'll be just introducing you to Kubernetes and set up a full application by the end of this session, this week. Um, so first things first is that yeah. So how do we set up Kubernetes on our local? There are a lot of there are a lot of options for that actually. You can use kind. You can use kind, short form for Kubernetes in Docker, I think. You can also use Minikube, KubeADM. But for this class or for this course, we are most likely going to use Minikube, and I think partly we're going to use kind, right, in the future. So yeah, so if you want to set up Minikube on your yeah, you will need to set up kubectl and Minikube, right? And so kubectl is like a command line tool that lets you run commands on your Kubernetes cluster, right? So you can install kubectl on Linux, on Mac, and on Windows. So just click on any of those links. Yeah, it will show you a guide on how to set it up. So you just need to call whatever the file, you need to validate the binary, then you just most likely run it, right? Yeah, download, run it. I use Linux, so my setup is different. There's also something called Choco on the Windows now. So there's also something called Choco on Windows. So you can always just do Choco install, and I think that should work. But yeah, you can always download the binary and install it manually, right? The way you like. And once you set up kubectl, you can now set up any of your local Kubernetes cluster to, right, Minikube or kind. Right? So I'll use Minikube for this session, and in the future, I don't know if I'll use kind just to mix things up and also to solve a particular issue. So to install Minikube, you can follow this installation guide, right? It's very, very helpful. You can choose from Linux, Mac, and Windows, right? And yeah, in every one you always see step. You can download the latest release, or you can use PowerShell, and you can just install it from the .exe file. And then if you're using PowerShell, you can add it to your path, right? And that's it. But if you're using Linux, you can just install the binary file and just sudo install it, and you have Minikube on your local PC, right? So now to start up your cluster, or your local Minikube cluster, yeah, for this stuff mine, right? You can just type in Minikube start, right? So what it does is fast for me, right? But for you that's just starting or setting up your Minikube for the first time, you're going to download a lot of things. You're going to download the Docker image. It's going to pull an image, right? And pulling the image might take some time. And you're going to set up some stuff like that it needs, right? And yeah, Minikube uses Docker as I don't know, there's a term they call it, right? As its virtual machine manager, or the container, right? For the images. And yeah, so you might need to set up Docker on your local. So depending on which one you want to use, right? Most likely you already have Docker, right? For if you're doing ML engineering, ML ops, you must have worked on Docker, most likely. So it's most likely assumed that you have Docker on your local PC, Docker desktop, Docker Compose, whatever Docker you have, right? So yeah, I didn't show that, but initially you need to have Docker on your PC, and I hope everyone here has Docker because we are building on top of Docker with Kubernetes, right? So um, most likely everyone here has looked at the material and they know what Kubernetes is, right? And what it entails, right? So to interact with your cluster, like I said, you need to have kubectl. I'm just going to show you some basic commands, right? You can always do kubectl easy help, right? And it will show you most of everything that you can do with it, right? There are a lot of commands, and most of them you might not end up using ever, and some you might end up using, depending. The most important ones are just the kubectl get, the kubectl describe, the kubectl logs. I hope you guys can see this left side of my screen. Kubectl exec, and there's kubectl apply, because you're going to build YAML, use YAML files to set up some of the configuration, right? So also I'm going to, in this class, I'm going to set up a basic deployment and service for us, just to um, bring us up to speed. And most likely in the next class, we're going to combine it with the user interface so we can see what we are building, right? So let's get started. Um, have there been any issues in setting up your Kubernetes cluster? If there's been any, you can drop your questions on the chat. Most likely you have it resolved. So yeah, so I'm going to create a folder, right? And I'm going to call it, let me say, app2, right? In app2, I'm going to create a file. So yeah, let me give an overview of what I'm going to do, right? I don't know how many of us know about databases and secure database and no secure database. So today what we're going to be working on is we're going to use Docker and Kubernetes to set up a a MongoDB app, a MongoDB database, right? And Mongo Express. So Mongo Express is a user interface that helps you interact with your MongoDB database, right? And instead of just using command line, you can always use the user interface to create databases, delete database, and set up some configurations, right? So what we're going to do, we're going to connect Mongo Express with MongoDB, right? And initially, first, we're going to just see how to set up a deployment and what the deployment is, a pod is, a service is, right? A config map, a secret, and what these things are, how to create those configurations. Then we're going to bring everything together by the end of the whole live coding session, maybe between today and the next live coding session, Monday, right? So the first thing is I'm going to create a MongoDB deployment, right? So let me create something. Yeah, call it mongodb.yam, right? So I know from your class, you know that Kubernetes works with YAML files, or you use something called manifest files to create pods, create deployments, create replica sets or namespaces. You know, we use YAML files to declare what services we need to build and how we want it to be built, right? So that's how YAML files are. That's what YAML files are for. There's a question on the chat. Pardon me. I tried installing Kubernetes here, but I tried to check it, but I'm getting this app comes from it. Wow. Oh, okay. I'm most likely by the end of the class, we'll find the solution to that. All right. So the first thing is that I want to create a deployment, and I'm sure we have gone through that material, and we know that a deployment is like a controller. It's a controller for pods, right? And what is a pod? A pod is like a single unit of Kubernetes, right? It's a single unit of Kubernetes, right? So what a pod is, like envelopes, or it wraps around Docker containers, right? And in a pod is like, let me say, an environment, right? In a pod, you can have a volume. In a pod, sorry about that. In a pod, it's like an environment for your container, right? It gives that container like a IP address, a port, and it gives it like volume to like storage. So that's what a pod is, just a single unit in Kubernetes, right? So what a deployment is like it's a way of controlling pods, right? You scale up your pods, you scale down your pods, right? You Sometimes your pods gets like they go down for some reason, right? It happens, go down for some reason. And your deployment controller just helps you bring it back up. So you set something in your YAML file, you declare this is state you want for your pod. You want 5 pods, you want 10 pods, and when something happens, one of them goes down. Your deployment is what brings it back up again, right? Self-healing, replicating, it controls like a whole lot of things in pods, and not many details I can go into. Right. So if you have Minikube on setup and you have kubectl setup, right? Also, I think for me, VS Code is a wonderful tool, right? It helps you do a whole lot of things. And one of the things it can help you do is it can help you like simply or build up your manifest files fast, right? So for me, I could just write something deployment, and it has helped me to like set up, it has helped me create a YAML file for you. You just need to change some configurations, set up your configurations the way you want it, right? So to do that, you just need to set up your Kubernetes extension here, right? It's a Kubernetes extension. So let me bring it here, right? You can install a Kubernetes extension, and that Kubernetes extension, so yeah, this Kubernetes extension sets up some other things like YAML and the likes, right? For you to easily set up your sorry about that, set up your YAML files. So since I said I'm going to create a MongoDB deployment, right? So I'm going to call the deployment MongoDB deployment, right? So I'll explain what all this means in a GP, right? So I want you to call this MongoDB, I want to call this MongoDB, I want to call this MongoDB. So let me explain what all this is. So first thing is that this is a manifest file, and here kind means the kind of let me say the kind of resource here. They've explained it for me. The kind of resource you want to create, right? There are a lot of resources. There's a pod, there's service, there's deployment, there's ingress, there's config map, there's secrets, and a whole lot of other things. Custom resource definitions, right? You can create your own resource, right? If you go further in Kubernetes, you see people creating their own resources, and yeah, so the kind helps you determine the kind of resource you want, right? So the metadata name, right? It helps you determine, right, what's what is the name of this deployment you want to create, right? So if you do some after you create your deployment, there's a name, right? And these names are very, very helpful also, like in discovering your resources, right? So the it's very, very helpful that your naming should follow a kind of convention, right? It follows a kind of convention too. But yeah, what metadata name is just naming the deployment, right? This whole deployment is called MongoDB deployment, right? For the spec, right? So label selectors, what it does is that it helps you select the pods you want in deployment. Like I said, right? In a deployment, a group of pods. So how does that deployment know which pod should be in its space, right? It's through the selector, right? So the selector has something they call the match labels, and there are some things they call labels in a in a pod, right? So in a pod you have labels, right? And so what your deployment is going to do is going to find any pod that has this kind of label, app MongoDB, right? So any pod that has app MongoDB is going to be selected in this deployment. It's going to be in this deployment, right? So now from the deployment, you can describe how you want your pods to be, right? So that's what this template is. Is your pod template. How can you describe one single pod in your deployment, right? So now also in deployment, in the pod, I want there to be a label, right? And the label is app MongoDB, and it has to match this, right? Right. So now this is your pod label. This is a label for each pod, right? And this is a label. I just don't want to confuse us. And so this is how deployment is going to select each pod, right? It's going to select each pod that is going to be in a deployment. So let me leave it at that, right? So um, now for the spec is how is like a desired behavior for your pod, right? How do you want your pod to be, right? So now in the pod, there's going to be a container, right? There are also something they call multi-containers. Yeah, like multiple containers in a single pod. That's also possible. But for this case, you're going to have a single container in a pod, right? So the name of that container is going to be MongoDB. And like I said, Kubernetes works with Docker, right? So there's something they call a Docker image, right? So if you go into Docker Hub, and Docker Hub is like a GitHub for Docker images, right? So in Docker Hub, you can see a lot of different images that people have created and are sharing to the world, right? So everyone can have access to the image that they created, right? So since we're working with MongoDB, I'm going to search for a um, Mongo image, right? The official Mongo image, right? Verified, right? So, and there's a specific name for their image, and it's Mongo, right? So I put in Mongo here, right? So this will tell Kubernetes to pull the Mongo image from Docker Hub, right? The Mongo image, the latest Mongo image, or whatever image, the stable image from Mongo, right? So that's what this image is, right? So there are, like I said, there are a lot of images. There's MySQL, like for MySQL database, there is PostgreSQL for PostgreSQL database. There are a whole lot of images, right? And depending on your use case, you want to use a particular image, right? So also now resources, right? So resources, it helps you like, right? So your pod is running in a computer, in a node. The standard name is a node, right? And in that particular node, there are resources with the size, 12 gig RAM, 8 gig CPU. Sorry, not eight, what's it called? The 8 gig CPU or whatever the 8 core. dual core, quad core, and they all have their giga, like their speed, right? So for a particular container or a pod, right? For a particular pod, you want to specify what that singular pod, what resources is going to use from your node, from your computer, from your PC, right? So this is how you limit it, right? You use the limits and you set your memory 128 megabytes. That should be enough for you, but for your pod, right? And CPU, what's 500 M means just half of a CPU core, right? So, so you can always say 1 gig, and you're going to use a one CPU core, but you have to be careful, right? So if you have like 10 of that and you you're going to so 10 times 128 is 128 1 gig, and so depending on the resources you have in your PC, that's what's going to be allocated to each pod. So be careful of allocating more than you have in your resources so that some particular pods don't um, go down, right? Most especially for the CPU, right? So imagine you have a quad core and you're creating like 10 of these, right? You most likely not have enough resources to create 10 of that, right? So it's not going to work, right? So also, there's now something they call the container ports, right? So each of these, like MongoDB, have a specific port it works on, right? So like, let me say, for example, your MySQL database um, works on what port? There's a specific port for it, 8080. I'm not sure if it's 8080. Yeah, you most likely get it from but it most likely looks like it's 8080, right? Um, yeah, it looks like it's 8080. But also for MongoDB, it has a different port, standard port it uses, right? So for MongoDB, you see that it's port 27017, right? So that's the port you're going to assign to this pod, right? 27017, right? That's the port for the container, right? Okay. So now this is that for setting it up, setting up in initial configuration. Now for a particular container, there might be different like configurations that you need to set also. Like you need to set up environment variables. Like now your database should have a password, right? You should have a password and you should have a username. And to check that, you most likely have to go to their configuration file like this, their page on Docker Hub. And you can see that there's something they call MongoDB init root username and MongoDB init root password, right? So these are the username and password that you want to use to connect to your MongoDB, right, as a root user, right? So you want to set that up, and to set that up, there are different ways to do that, right? So you can just type in a password in this YAML file, but since this YAML file will most likely be on GitHub or wherever your company or wherever you share your YAML files and manifest files, it's not standard for you to share to put in delicate things like usernames and password on there, right? So there's now something that's called the secrets, right? So Kubernetes gives you a like something like a configuration, like a resource that helps you share um, password, username secretly, right? And gives your details. I hope I'm still audible. I got any call. Can you guys hear me? Sorry, am I audible? Hello, can anybody hear me? Hello.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So to set that up, you have to create something called the environment, right? The environment variable. And each environment variable should have a name and a value, right? A name and a value, right? So the first environment variable is Mongo init root username, right? And now to get the value, am I getting an error? Wait. Okay. So yeah, YAML files are very, they have this kind of formatting, and you have to follow that formatting, or you most likely get an error, and it's not validating. And also, let me create for the Mongo init root password, right? So, and it has a value, right? So now we have left out the value. We have left out values because we want to not expose our passwords and usernames to the world, right? So now to continue from here, I'm going to create something they call a secret, right? We're going to create a secret, right? The first step was creating the deployment and the pods, right? This is what has been done here. Now, the next thing is to create a secret so we can store uh, what's our data, right? So to create a secret, just create a YAML file, call it MongoDB secrets, right? The YAML, right? And also, like I said, you can just do something like this, and you have everything set up for you. So I can call this MongoDB secret, right? And also, like previously, you have a kind, right? So this is how you specify your resource. Your kind is secret. The name of this resource, when it's created in Kubernetes, is going to be MongoDB secret. And there's something that's called type. And the most popular type is the opaque. And you can always like search for different secret types that you want, depending on your use case, right? So I'm not sure I've used anything other than opaque, right? And opaque stand works just fine. There might be others, right? Service account token, yeah, the service account token, there's Docker CFG. So there are different types, but the most popular one is just your pick, right? Most of the time you just use that. Right. So now data is where you put in those your delicate data. And the most important thing is that whatever data you put in here must be base 64 encoded, right? It's on base 64 encoded, and that's where the secretness is. That's where the um the hiding is, right? So I'm going to create something. I'm going to store two things here. I'm going to call it root. Sorry, let me call it MongoDB root username. This is right. And I'm going to also call MongoDB root password, right? And so to continue from here, I'm going to create. I'm going to use a command. I'm going to use a command that I've shown before. So now, if you are familiar with command line, so what this does is that I'm going to pipe this particular string into base 64. That's going to help me encode this, right, with base 64, right? So what I'm doing here is I'm just saying that my username should be username. So what I'm saying as I'm setting as my username is username. So it's going to base 64 encode username. I hope that's clear, right? So when I do that, I'm going to copy this and put it into here, right? And also I'm going to do that for password too, right? So I'm going to just set my password as password. I'm going to base it and encode that, right? Um, and that's that. So we have two the keyword key value pairs here. We have the root MongoDB root username, and we have the MongoDB root password. So now that we have the secret, how do we reference it in our deployment file, right? That's the next thing we need to do, right? To reference our secrets here, because without this, the MongoDB is not going to start. It's going to throw an error because it needs you to set the root username and root password, right? So in Kubernetes, there's something called value from, right? So you're telling it get this value from somewhere, right? Get this value from somewhere. And it's something called secret key ref, right? So what you're telling it is that this. So what you're telling is that the what's it? You should get the secret key or whatever thing you stored from a particular secret key, a secret, right? So now to specify the secret, you need to give it a name. Hope this is valid, right? So what do we save our secret key as? MongoDB secrets, right? So we're going to get our secrets from MongoDB secrets, and the particular key is for this username is MongoDB root password. Sorry, root username. Right. Hope this is clear. So first things first, we create an environment variable because from Docker, you need to set some environment variables. The MongoDB init root username, MongoDB init root password, right? Now, because we don't want this particular sensitive data to be exposed, we put it in a secret, right? And we put it in a secret, we create a secret resource, we give it a name, and we give it the two keywords and key and values that we want to store basically for encoding each value, right? Because the only basis for going to accept, right? Now to reference this particular secret key, back in our deployments, we use the secret key ref and we give it a name. We give it the name of the secret key and the particular key from the secret that we want, right? And that's the MongoDB root username here, right? Now we're going to do that also for our password, right? And we can just copy this here, copy this and paste here, right? And we just call password. Okay, so we have set up a deployment, and for let's just how should I do this? Should I create a service? Um, let's just create a deployment and see and just look at it, some particular commands that we might face, right? So let me cd into this particular directory. Okay. So now you have created a YAML file. Now, how do we apply this YAML file? How do we create those particular resources? So like I said, to interact with your cluster, you use something called kubectl. And there's a particular command called apply. And you specify the file you want it to create from, right? So if we do that, we see that it created the secret and it created the deployment, right? So we can just do kubectl. Now to interact and see what has been done, just do kubectl get secret. And we can see from here that, sorry, we can see that the secret, MongoDB secret has been created, right? So like I said, the names are what's referenced in MongoDB. And if you say kubectl get deployment, okay, we see that MongoDB deployment is created and is already ready, up to date, available, and recently created, right? So I have to give a caveat. The caveat is that I've already done this before and it had downloaded the Docker image into my local. And what it just did was to grab it from my local. In your case, it might take you 6 minutes for this to set up because it needs to pull the YAML. You need to pull the image from Docker Hub. And the images are very large, right? Depending on your PC, right? You can see something like, depending on the PC actually, and the version, 248 MB, and there's 2 gigs, right? So if it takes you a while, do not stop it. Just be patient with it, and yeah, it will get everything set up for you, right? So now, like I said, there's a deployment and there's something that's called there's not a pod, right? So you can just do kubectl get pods or pod, anyone. Both of them work, right? And we see that the pod is given a unique name apart from the deployments because of this extra string here, right? And yeah, it's running and it has not restarted. And the other commands you can do, like kubectl describe, right? Describe pod, and give it the name of the pod you want it to describe. And you get a long, let me say a long YAML file, right? Explaining a lot of things. This is the start time. Like I said, the label that we assigned it to app MongoDB, the IP address for that particular pod, right? Every pod has an IP address. The container ID, the image name, the image ID, the ports that is working on 2270, the limits, right? And the requested the one that is requested, the like I said, the environment variables that we set, image init root username, set to the key of. So you see that it doesn't show any sensitive data, and it also tells us how it went about it, like setting the pod up, right? So it's like I said, you pull the image quite fast, 2 seconds, because it was already in my local, right? And it created the pod and started the pod. You can also do something called kubectl think log. Let me do get pod, right? Right, so you can do kubectl logs, right? And is it give you the logs of your particular. Hope I got this right. It's like yes, so I got it right. So this is like in your particular in that database, right? There's this is what has gone on in that particular database. These are the logs that it has been it's, let's say showing or storing for us, right? And it's saying that it's waiting for connection with port 27017. Right. So there are a whole lot of commands you can run, right? I think there's kubectl exec, right? So what that does, let me go back to my command, right? So let me say kubectl exec it. So what this is that is going to be interactive, right? And bash. So what it's going to do is that it's going to execute a command in your pod. And that particular command, you want it to be interactive. So you want it to give you back the terminal, right? It's not going to run and leave the terminal. It's going to give you back the terminal, and we're going to run a bash like it's going to give you a command line interface in that particular pod, right? So now we're inside the MongoDB pod, and I don't know what commands run inside, but yeah, it's ls. So ls works, and you can see a whole lot of files from inside the Docker, from inside the pod itself, right? So let me just exit from here. So these are like basic commands you can use to look into your pods and your deployments, right? So quickly, I'm going to show us like how to create a service. And by next week, we're going to create Mongo Express, and we're going to couple everything together, right? So now to create your service. So what's the service at first? So your service is like the standard way of communicating with your pod, right? So in most Kubernetes applications, there's a service right in front of a pod, right? Because um, a pod can go up and go down, right? Some things can happen and your pod just loses connection, it just loses resources. So because of that, when a new pod comes up, it loses its IP, right? It creates a new IP. And if you are like manually connecting to your pod, you have lost connection to that particular pod just like that. And you have to do some more service discovery to find out the new IP for that pod, right? So what a service does is that a service is stagnant. Your service is like foolproof, like it stays. So even though a particular pod is down and comes back up, your service registers that IP. And so if you connect to your service is going to connect to it's going to send your connection, your request to that pod. And imagine if you have like 5 pods, your service is going to act like a load balancer, right? So depending on whatever the pod is running at that point in time, it's going to choose which pod is available for your particular request, right? So it's standard practice to have a service in front of your pods, right? Or in front of your deployments. So now to create your service, I'm sorry. Yeah. So to create your service, you can just like that, just create a service, give it a name, MongoDB service, right? Um, so now this is where it's very important, right? So how does your service know which port to connect to? So you give it the selector, like how is it going to know which port to route traffic to? I just love this what's it called? These hints or highlights that it shows here. It's really helpful, right? So how does the service know which pod is registered to it? Use the selector. I remember that we created a label for our pods, so we just copy that into here, and we can see that we, we are now telling the service that you should select every single pod that has this particular label app MongoDB, right? So that's how you're going to do that. So the next thing is to determine what ports you want it to work on, right? So a port has a port, your service has a port, right? So this port is the particular port for the service. And let me use the target port, right? So the target port is the port of your particular pod, right? So like I said, from here, we know that the port that is open to this port is port 27017. And that's the port that the service is going to make a communication, is make his request to. Now, the next thing is for you to decide what ports do you want to connect to that service. Like, what port do you want to expose? Yeah, correct terminology. What port do you want to expose for that service, right? And you can always choose the same port, right? 27017. And you can always use a different ports like port 8080, port 8000, ports whatever port you want to use, but I'm going to use 27017, right? So we have created the YAML manifest file for our service, and we can just, like I said, to apply or to create that resource, you just run, right? And so what this is going to do is going to tell what is going to happen is that it's going to find out that you didn't change your secrets, you didn't change your deployment config, but you created a service, right? So it's going to create a new service for you called MongoDB service. And now to interact or see if your service is up and running, you do kubectl get SVC or get service, right? Both of these work, right? So you see that we use the standard type cluster IP. We have an IP address for the service, and we have a port to connect to, right? So yeah, we can always do something called kubectl, I think describe. Yeah, you can describe your service, right? Let me see. Right, let me see what's going to do. Now, yeah, so we see that now, yeah, these IP addresses, there's something called the endpoints, right? And if you remember, um, sorry, let me just say something. Like this endpoint means the number of ports that are connected to that service, right? The number of ports that this service is directly referencing or connecting to, right? So to be sure of what I'm saying, I'm going to do kubectl get ports. Then this is going to make the outputs, it's going to be more verbose, right? It's going to show us a whole lot of details than just get ports. Right? And if you look at this IP address 10.244.0.1.0.14, you see that it matches this endpoint. So in this endpoint it's like a list that the services, it lists the ports that are available for it, that are connected to it, and any requests are sent to the endpoints in this endpoint list, right? So depending on the number of ports I create, it might be 4, 5, or just 2 or 1, because I created one port, right? So this is 1246. Yeah, I think I've covered the basics for Kubernetes, right? Setting up Kubernetes in your local, interacting with your Kubernetes clusters and whatnot. So this short time, I think I'm available for questions. And in the next class, like I said, I'm going to create Mongo Express deployments. Mongo Express is the user interface for you to see what is going on in your pod, right? So I'm going to show you how to create the MongoDB Express or Mongo Express for you to interact with your MongoDB database. So if you have any questions, you can drop them in chat. You can ask me personally. Okay, I think there was an issue. Are there any questions? Try installing the kubectl bone. I'm going to check the version of facing message account from my PC. Scan the version for your PC, check with the software publisher. This is a very weird error. And if I find the solution, I'll get back to you, blessing. Hope that's clear.
Sorry, I had to mute myself. Yes, it's clear. But I noticed that when I went to their website, that's the kubectl, they actually gave a warning that before you begin, you must use a kubectl version that is within one minor version difference of your cluster. For example, this and that. So they're now saying that using the latest compatible version of kubectl helps avoid unforeseen issues. So I think that's where the issue is. I downloaded the kubectl, that's 1.28.3 version. So I don't know where the issue is, where it's not compatible.
Is that Windows?
Yes, for Windows.
You say 1.28.3.
Yes, I went to their website.
Okay.
So they were like, you can download it using either that one or you download using the koi.exe.
Yeah.
But now
Yeah.
I'm having issues. I've been having issues using the koi.exe to download because I don't know, we've been having network issues around both Glo and MTN. So that was why I downloaded
Yeah.
the file. I just downloaded the file directly
Okay.
and I don't know why. But right now, as I'm talking, I'm using the koi.exe. I'm using the koi to download right now. But I don't know why the first one did not work because I think they are the same version, which is the 1.28.3.
All right. You know what I'm going to do now? It's just if you're having a kubectl issue, what I'll just tell you is set up Minikube. You have Minikube set up.
Yes, I've been able to do that on Minikube.
Okay. So Minikube has its own kubectl. So there's a way to create an alias kubectl with that kubectl, right? So let me just share my screen and show you.
Uh,
I don't know, I've not seen that error before, but yeah, this is what I'm saying. This is it. There's this Minikube kubectl, and you can create an alias with it, and you should just be able to use kubectl, and you should use Minikube kubectl for you. But if this doesn't work, I think you should downgrade to maybe 1.28.3. Let me see my kubectl version. Okay, there's no flag like that. Oh, what's this? What's this? You check version. Okay, kubectl version. Okay. Oh, okay. Customized version. 1.27. Okay, I'm using 1.27. Most of the times I just feel like you should just use the version below it. Most of the times they just complicate things with newer versions. So yeah, maybe you can try 1.27 instead and install that and see. kubectl is kubectl. I don't know. They just make few changes. Do you understand?
okay. Yes, I do, but I don't think on their website I can't see that of the version 1.27. It's just 1.28.
Oh, you know what you do in that coil, right? In that coil, if you finally end up if you finally end up getting a better network, in that core, you see that there's a V 1.28.3. You can change that to 1.27.3. Just change that H to 7,
Okay.
and you should get that.
Oh wait,
Also, there's a download
sorry.
link. Okay.
Sorry, I've been able to use the coil because I think the network is good today. So the issue was that anytime I run the kubectl version client or something, it will say this app cannot run on your system. So now that I've used the coil and I ran the kubectl version client, it's not bringing out such errors, bringing out the client version, blah blah blah. I think that should be good. Can you hear me?
Okay. Okay. All right now. All right.
All right, thank you.
All right. Yeah. Voilà.
But sorry, if we have
Okay.
questions, how can we actually connect to you?
Connect to me. Maybe you just talk to your Hamuye, and you direct. I'm not really online now. But if anything, I'll drop my LinkedIn profile if there's anything.
All right, no problem. Thank
All right.
you.
Yeah. All right, take care.
Yeah.
Have a good day. To everyone.